BC Ag Today again. We appreciate everyone joining us. Hope everyone's continuing to do well and stay healthy. We're pleased to be joined this morning by Tremaine Hatch, our Extension Viticulture Specialist, and Tremaine's going to be giving some updates from the vineyard side of things. So hopefully we've got quite a few folks on the line with us this morning representing the vineyard community in Virginia. So thank you, Tremaine, for joining us this morning. Before we get started and I turn it over to Tremaine, just a couple of housekeeping tips for everyone that's joining us. You all have been muted upon entry, and you won't be able to unmute yourself until the end of the presentation. We're trying to put some security measures in place. So throughout the presentation, if you have questions or comments, if you have the ability to type those in the chat box, if you're joining us via a computer or laptop, please do so. If not, if you're joining us via a landline or just a cell phone, if you just save those questions and comments to the end, we'll open it up at the end for some questions for Tremaine. So I'm sure people have got some burning questions with some of the weather we've had this spring, and maybe you're encountering some issues with frost or disease or damage because of some of those. So hopefully we can get a good discussion at the end. So with that being said, I guess we'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Tremaine. So thank you for joining us this morning. And I'm not sure if you have a slide presentation, but if you do, you should have the ability to share that with us. So thanks for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you. And just while you're still on, if you could, I think somebody else is sharing their screen now, so I can't share my screen right now. Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen and hear me?
Yes, sir, Tremaine. Everything looks good.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Robbie, and thanks for the opportunity to have me on. So again, I work at an AREC near Winchester, Virginia. So I'm up in the top corner of the state, and I do extension work for wine grape growers across the state. So I'm going to focus on grapes. And unfortunately, grape growers have had a tough spring on top of the pandemic with a number of frost events. So I'll dig in a little bit deeper on what happens when there's frost in the vineyard and how things might look moving forward. And then I'm going to address a couple questions from the field with a line of thinking that if somebody asks, there's probably a couple people wondering about it. And so I'll address those in this format. So we'll move right on. So first, dealing with grapevines. Grapevines are perennial plants, so there's a woody portion of the grapevine that can overwinter, sustain itself during freezing temperatures. But we also have green tissue that develops in the springtime. So up here in Winchester, we start seeing bud development and green tissue growth early to mid-April, depending on the winter and springtime. And this green tissue is primarily water, so it can freeze, damaging organelles and cell walls, and if there is injury, those contents leak out so that the tissue dies. Fortunately for grape growers, grapes have compound buds, so the buds that are retained on a grapevine during dormant pruning have essentially three compressed shoots, and the crop on grapevines is initiated in the year previous. So the crop for the 2020 growing season, this current growing season, was initiated last growing season, May and June of 2019. That being said, when there is frost injury on grapevines, there's a loss of crop potential. So on these compound buds with three compressed shoots, the primary shoot has the most crop potential, a full crop, 2-3 clusters per shoot. If that bud is injured, the secondary bud can push. The secondary bud might have anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of the crop potential, so maybe 1 cluster per shoot. If that bud is injured, we go into tertiary bud, and that bud has very little crop potential. So frost injury to grapevines won't kill the grapevines, but there will be a loss of crop production. Across the state, we've had 2 clusters of frost events. So in mid to late April, going from the 11th to the 19th of April, we had a couple frost episodes across the state. And then around Mother's Day, so May 8th to a big one there on Sunday morning, the 10th of May, we had another round of frost events. Frost events in April typically aren't that problematic, but what threw a wrench into our production this year is that we had a really warm March time. So grapevines began green shoot development fairly early this growing season, so they were pretty susceptible in late April to frost. So in the really unfortunate circumstance that some vineyards are facing this year, they developed shoots in mid-April and then were frosted once, killing the primary bud, and the secondary buds started development, and unfortunately then in May the secondary buds were frosted as well, which is a tough set of circumstances for vineyards as far as crop production this year. So what happens when grapevines are frosted? Green tissue is killed, and because when we have frost episodes here across the Commonwealth, it's usually temperatures right around the freezing point of water, 32 degrees, sometimes down to 27 degrees. We see variability. So it's not uncommon that there's a number of shoots that are sustained throughout the frost episode with very little injury, as shown here on the slide with the big green shoots. And then other shoots are injured and sometimes completely killed. So it makes for a complicated management for vineyard managers just because there's this variability of injury across the field. So say there's a frost episode, what should a grape grower do? First, accept our condolences. It's no fun to wake up or to be out early in the morning and see injury in the vineyard. The first step would be to survey the damage and just get a feel for what's going on out in the field. There's often some differences according to field topography, where the lower lying areas, there's more frost injury, and then the crowns of the hill, there'll be a little bit less frost injury. So survey by management zones or blocks, and the three general categories that we've been using this spring is the shoots that have no damage at all, that are healthy and didn't suffer any injury due to freezing temperatures. And then the flip side of that would be shoots that are completely killed due to cold temperatures. And then the third category would be shoots that suffered some injury to portions of the shoot, often the shoot tip at the top of the shoot, and some of those first nodes and internodes might be frosted. Now, with these three categories of shoots, we can go through what we'd expect as far as vegetative growth, crop level, and maturity of crop at harvest time. So as far as vegetative growth, non-damaged shoots will proceed as normal. Completely damaged shoots, on the other hand, there'll be a delay, and then the secondary bud, that compressed shoot, will push out. So there'll be, as far as phenological development, shoots that are a little delayed compared to their peers, the primary shoots that were not injured by the frost event. And then where the shoot tip was injured, so there's partial shoot injury, there as far as vegetative growth, the shoot tip is not going to cease growth, but then we'll see a summer lateral. So at the node, we'll see a new shoot tip emerge, and in some cases 2 or 3 of these emerge. So where you had one shoot, it will branch fairly low and develop into a couple shoots. For the 3 different categories of injury, what do we expect for crop level? For the non-damaged shoots, full crop potential. For the completely damaged shoots, again, we'll go on to the secondary or tertiary buds. So we might anticipate a third of crop potential. So if you were looking at cultivar with 3 clusters per shoot, you might be down to 1 cluster per shoot. And in the case where you're frosted twice and you're down to the tertiary buds, there's probably not much crop potential on those shoots. And then for the third category of shoots where there's modest injury, that's where the crop level can be a little difficult. The inflorescences, or the flower clusters, are usually at between nodes 2 and 5. So depending on the severity of the injury, the inflorescence may or may not have been injured. Depending on that factor, you may be looking at a full crop potential to maybe one of the clusters survived, or maybe none of the clusters survived that injury. It really is a case-by-case scenario. The other thing to mention about crop level on those partially damaged shoots is that the shoot will probably be a little starved for carbohydrates around bloom time, which, depending on the region of the state, may be late May to early June. So you may see a little bit lighter fruit set where there's been partial injury to shoots. And then as far as crop maturity, again, going through these 3 different categories of shoots. Non-damaged shoots, they're going to ripen on somewhat of a normal trajectory. So we'll see, you could use as a template harvest dates throughout the growing season, throughout the past couple of years. For the completely damaged shoots, again, the primary shoot was killed. The secondary shoot takes a little bit of time to start development. So they are going to be on similar trajectory as far as producing and ripening a crop, but the start point for that will be delayed. So usually we see development of those shoots taking a little bit, moving a little bit delayed throughout the growing season. So bloom will be a little bit delayed, veraison will be a little bit delayed, and then harvest will be a little bit delayed. Something that helps those shoots move more rapidly is that they do have less crop. So as far as sugar accumulation, it takes a little bit less time to accumulate sugar in those clusters. And then partial shoot injury, more or less same trajectory for crop ripening as an undamaged shoot. So here's a couple images we've taken in early, late April, early May. So you'll see there with a blue circle around it, that was the primary shoot that was injured early on. So that tissue is dried up, necrotic, essentially dead. But there, the secondary bud has started to develop and actually surpass that primary shoot in its size at this point. And this is what we'd see with the partial shoot injury. So in this situation, it looks like some of the leaves have been modestly injured, and then the shoot tip has been injured. So in this case, we'll probably see summer laterals developing from this internode and bypassing that injured shoot tip. So what do vineyard managers have to do when they've got a mixed populations of shoots out in their vineyard? So again, the biggest difference will be crop level on the primary shoots to the secondary shoots, and then differences in development or phenology of those secondary shoots. So again, on the secondary shoots, crop level will be a little bit lighter. Crop ripening will be a little delayed. And then critical for vineyard managers dealing with this here in the next couple weeks is disease control. So when grapevines flower, that flower and newly set fruit is very susceptible to a number of different pathogens. So bloom time is when growers are very considerate and aggressive with their pest management at that point. Because we've got a second population of shoots that's delayed, that 6-week period from pre-bloom through development of berries, that's going to be extended. So it might be anywhere from 8 weeks long now that growers will really have to be on top of their spray programs to make sure that fruit does not sustain disease during this time period. On the flip side, if the vineyard was frosted a couple times and there's very little fruit out there, there's going to be less fruit to protect, so one might be able to use a less aggressive spray program in that situation if the vineyard doesn't have much fruit on it. All right, I'm going to switch gears now and still talk about frost, but some of the different implications we see across the industry. So one of the questions that came up for farm wineries is, how do they move forward? So if they lost a lot of crop, but they're still required to produce 51% of the grapes that they use for wine production, does that just mean they can't make any wine in this situation? So to clarify a little bit, for farm wineries, which I know the majority of our wineries are, there's a requirement for their license that 51% of the fruit used in their wine production is grown by them on their farm or a farm they operate. And so what a farm winery could do if they suffer frost injury and they want to move forward and make the amount of wine they would make in a normal year is they need to petition for an exemption to this requirement. So step one would be to record the injury that any grower would do already. Secondly, contact a local Virginia Cooperative Extension agent to help with the confirmation of damage. We've shared a letter from the Virginia Wineries Association to Cooperative Extension agents, and that letter is a template that one would send to VDAX, and that letter would provide information about how much crop was lost due to frost, and then a confirmation from a Virginia Cooperative Extension agent or some other third party. And you would send that to VDAX. VDAX would then share that information with Virginia ABC. And if the exemption is awarded, you would hear back from Virginia ABC. So again, here's the series of steps that one would proceed through if they suffered frost injury and they were limited in how much wine they could make here this coming year. Again, thanks to the Virginia Wineries Association for providing this template for us to use. This is a question that came in from the Hampton Roads area. This is a picture of a grape inflorescence with a lot of kind of galling or tumor-like growth. It looks pretty wild. And we see this every year. No, it's not, COVID on grapes or anything like that. It is the vine's response to grape tumid gall makers. So these midges can irritate grapevine tissue, green tissue. So you might see this on the grapevine inflorescence like we saw in the picture earlier, or on tendrils, on shoots, on leaves, on petioles. In most cases, it's just sort of a novelty. You'll see a pretty low incidence of this. There are some circumstances where we see, particularly with the cultivar Traminette, enough of this injury that it's worth controlling the pest. So in the 2020 Pest Management Guide, Movento has been listed as a material that can control grape tumid gall makers in the vineyard. Again, in most cases, this pest does not require control. So a little bit about viticulture resources and how we may have shifted things a little bit this year. We do carry on with our viticulture notes, our electronic newsletter. We've shifted from a group email to a Google group for distribution of that. So if you haven't heard from us a couple times this spring and you want to, contact me or go to our website and we can make sure that you're part of that Google group. Because we're not in a situation where we can have face-to-face meetings in the vineyard this spring, we are doing vineyard Zoom sessions. We had one last Thursday, and the next one will take place on the 4th of June. You'll hear from a number of specialists, including myself, and we'll talk about what's going on in the state. We are requiring registration for these. It is a free Zoom meeting, but we do require registration. So contact me or keep an eye towards Viticulture Notes if you'd like to participate in the next one of these on the 4th of June. Our grape pathologist, Dr. Mizuho Mida, has a wonderful grape pathology blog. I saw he just made an update late last night. So we're entering a really important time for disease management in the vineyard. So keeping up to date of what's going on, what materials can be used to control what pathogens is really important. So his blog is really an excellent resource and it's up to date. And lastly, a request. We are not able to get out and visit vineyards across the state this spring. So send us pictures of things that you are seeing. We're very familiar with what's going on here at our vineyard here in Winchester. However, we're not able to get out and see what's going on in your vineyard. So send us pictures of things that you're seeing, and we're happy to address them, and we may use them in our Zoom sessions to address questions from the field. Now, the last thing I want to do is show a couple of videos that I took in our vineyard last week. I know that some of you are just listening, so I'll try to annotate these as we move forward. But just to show an example of shoot thinning, which is the canopy management task that we're proceeding through right now in our vineyard. And then also we've installed a new vineyard this spring, so I'll show an example of how we tied an earth anchor to a line post. So bear with me, and I will switch my screen over to view these videos. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. So here's an example of shoot thinning a VSP trained vine. So this is Petit Manseng and the shoot thinning that took place last week. What we're trying to do is thin out the number of shoots to about 3 to 5 shoots per linear foot of canopy. That aids in limiting congestion. We want to retain a fruitful shoot at each spur and be able to get sunlight and control methods in on those new inflorescences. And I'll share one more little video here. So this is an end assembly that we installed here at the A-Rick in a new vineyard we've been installing. So this is our old vineyard that's been in the ground for 20 years. And we noticed that the end assemblies were slipping down the post a little bit. So the new vineyard we installed, we've wrapped the wire an extra time around the post. So here's Jonathan Ames, a Virginia Tech undergrad student that's helping us this summer, providing a demonstration of installing a wire that connects the earth anchor to the line end post. And in case you're wondering, we did speed this up a little bit just to make it a shorter video. So there's an extra loop around the end post that should provide some resistance to that wire slipping down the post. Here's a close-up of that extra loop. And the finished product. So with that, I'm gonna close down, and if I can address any questions in the chat bar, I'll try to do so now. All right, so the Zoom on the 4th of June will take place at noon, and they've been about 2.5 hours. And like most of these Zoom sessions, we are recording them. But so yeah, the 4th of June will take place at 2 p.m. or noon, I'm sorry, and be available after a little bit of time for as a recording. We are providing closed captioning of the videos we release, and so that just takes a little bit of time. And then another question that came in the chat bar. I am happy to provide links to these. To get viticulture notes, probably the easiest way is to contact me, and I will add you to the Google group that we use to distribute viticulture notes. And the pathology blog, if you plug into a search engine, grape pathology, you will find it, or here I can look it up. One moment. All right, so I will copy this and put it in the chat bar. All right. I'm happy to address any more questions or if there's any comments.
All right, thanks, Tremaine. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you very much for the viticulture update. I guess we'll go ahead and unmute the participants that are joining us this morning. If you have questions, we'll open it up for comments or questions at this time. Please ask questions. That's why we have these meetings is so that, you, the producers or industry folks can have an interaction with our specialists and agents. So if you have questions or comments, please do those. So you do have the ability to unmute yourself now. So if you have questions, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask those.
Excellent. And thanks for the opportunity. This is a lot of fun.
Robbie, I have a question for Tremaine.
Sure.
Yes, sir, Mike.
Tremaine, listen, I got my degree in crop science, so I know very little about grapes. So please excuse my ignorance in vineyards, but like beekeeping, I'm trying to learn more about it. Is there anything vineyards can do? What are available options to protect against frost? And corn growers have it, but we're stretched over acres and acres and thousands of acres, where vineyards can be a little bit smaller. Is there anything reasonable somebody can do that won't cost an arm and a leg?
Yeah. So the most straightforward things one can do is site selection. So where the vineyard is located. Often our freezes or frosts take place at lower elevations, so taking advantage of higher topography can help out a lot. But that's not something that one can do, once the vineyard's already installed. I'll go from really expensive to less expensive. Again, most of our frosts take place on cool, still evenings, so we see a stratification of the air. So some vineyards have chosen to fly helicopters or install wind machines that would help push the warmer air down towards the soil surface. Again, that's a pretty expensive route, but some of our bigger producers have found that meets their requirements. Less expensive, but a little bit less sure would be things like adding heat to the vineyards. So some people burn fires, some people now burn candles that are manufactured in Southwest Virginia. Unfortunately, most heat goes straight up, so it doesn't really offer much crop protection. And then the last avenue has been things that could be sprayed on the vineyard to protect for our frost. And this is where they're a little bit less reliable, but there's two major approaches. One has been to spray something to kind of change the osmotic potential. So essentially change the freezing temperature of the grapevines. There's a number of materials that are marketed to this. They've got a mixed review. As far as I'm aware, we haven't seen research that shows an improvement or more cold tolerance, but growers use them. My recommendation would be, if a grower chooses to go this route, to leave an untreated check just to see if the vineyard, see how that material performed under your field conditions. The other route that some have gone has been using something like a biocide, like copper, to remove bacteria off the crop surface, and that would sort of lessen the number of ice nucleating materials on the crop surface that could help protect from our frost. So a number of our new copper formulations have been used to this. Again, the same recommendation, leave an untreated check just to see if it worked in your farm circumstances. And then something that has worked, but it's not quick, is people have used oils like Amigo oil to slow bud respiration. So it's applied not right before frost, but a couple weeks before the frost, and it could slow bud development in the springtime. A lot of work with that has been done at Ohio State University by Dr. Ahmed Daghi. So those are the routes. Unfortunately, there's not a silver bullet, and they all can be pretty expensive, but those are the routes that people go with.
Thank you. And one last question I had, again, a little bit ignorant to grapes here, but I'm assuming that shoot damage done in 1 year, say 2020, and we have suffered pretty good here in Carolina, that doesn't affect next year's crop. Is that correct?
It should not. It should not. It's important that growers keep up with their canopy management, just so, the fruit for 2021 will be initiated here in the next couple of weeks. So not letting diseases get out of control, not completely abandoning canopy management, but no, it shouldn't have any negative impact on their 2021 crop.
Thank you. I didn't think so, but I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. Sure, no problem.
All right, thanks, Mike. Really good questions. I know that's probably something that folks were thinking about. What can we do to maybe mitigate this in the future? So really good points to make. Any other questions or comments for Tremaine this morning? I know we got some folks joining us from across the state, so I would just be interested to know, what the damage was maybe in your area if you're from another part of the state, or if you're from our part of the state here in Eastern Virginia, what you may have experienced in your own vineyard. Just to share some of those comments to see kind of where we are across the state at this point. Any comments or questions regarding that?
Just a quick update from here in Winchester area. We did suffer some injury, particularly that Mother's Day freeze. Depending on the area of the vineyard, anywhere from 30 to about 50% injury to shoots.
All right, well, we appreciate it, Tremaine. And for those of you that were asking, if you take a look at the chat box, there's a couple other points there I'd like to point out. One is Tremaine did add the link there to the Grape Pathology blog. So if you're interested in getting that information, you can find that there. It's just grapepathology.blogspot.com. So that may be a beneficial resource for you. The other thing that we've got there is we've got an evaluation for our program. So we are trying to get folks to evaluate our program. So you'll see a link there in the chat box, as well as it's scrolling across the screen as the slides progress through. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a few moments to take a brief survey for us and let us know, how you thought our program was, if you thought this was beneficial to your production. And also provide comments and feedback of future topics or what we can do to make things better for you. So I'm going to just try one last thing here and just unmute everyone just to make sure. I know sometimes it's difficult for folks to be able to unmute, especially from a landline. So I'm going to just unmute everybody real quick and have a last call for questions or comments. If you have a lot of background noise or something where you are, if you wouldn't mind just remuting yourself or something to try to limit that. So let me just do that real quick here. All right, everyone should be unmuted at this time. So you should have the ability to ask questions or comments if you have those for a last call. All right, well, not hearing anything. Tremaine, we appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you again for your time and your updates. If you do have viticulture questions, please contact your local A&R extension agent or your local office, and we'll be glad to reach out to Tremaine and get you some answers for those questions. Again, as a reminder, if you would, please take a few moments to complete our brief survey for VC Ag Today. That would really help provide us with some great feedback. We appreciate you taking the time to do that. And finally, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us again this morning. I'd like to thank my group of colleague agents that helped make this effort possible: Laura Maxey May in Hanover County, Mike Broadus in Caroline and King George County, Stephanie Romelchek in Westmoreland County, and Trent Jones in Northumberland and Lancaster County. So thank you all for all the hard work that you do to make this program possible. We will also have this recorded, so if you were not able to catch the whole thing, or you know someone that would benefit from this this viticulture update, we will be sending that out to the link where we post all of our recordings. So that has been scrolling across as well. So please check that out if you'd like to see the recording of this. So thank you, everyone. Again, we appreciate you joining us, and hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.